We are on the end of something that's been running for generations. A lot of people say guys need to open up more. We also, guys, really do need something to focus on of like, how am I moving forward? Therapeutic approach that I work in is recognizing what is, say, emotionally hasn't been expressed. When it's all suppressed, it will start coming out in other ways. It's not actually uncomfortable to feel emotion. It's uncomfortable to try not to feel emotion.
Yeah.
For me, the strongest men are the ones who don't deny any aspect of their expression.
Welcome to another episode of Mental Reset, real talk and real tools for men's mental health. Don't forget to like and subscribe and support our journey in protecting and improving the world of men's mental health. Today I'm here, as always, with my fantastic co-host, James.
Hello.
And we've got a great guest today, someone that I've worked out, I've known for 23, 24 years. He's a qualified psychotherapist, and as we'll hear about, it's his own lived experience and journey that's probably led him to that point. James Garside, great to have you on.
Thanks so much, man. Great to see you guys. Thanks for having me.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome to the show. And not just the psychotherapist, you're doing some great things in the world of men's mental health. You've got the Brotherhood, a men's kind of meet and a walk and talk group. Love Kettering, you're doing some great things in the community. So much to talk about. I don't even know where to start. So let's start with a bit about your journey, your why, what's led you to want to become a psychotherapist.
You know, like I spent a lot of my life really feeling like a bit of an outsider. I got bullied very hard when I was young, from about 8 years old till 18. And I always felt a little bit like I didn't fit in. When I left school, I was very shy, very anxious. And we probably met not long after that. And you know, we met in a rave scene, right? And actually that kind of environment, that scene, is one of the first places where I kind of felt a little bit of a sense of like, actually a bit of a belonging. You know, people there are so kind of welcoming and inclusive that basically anything goes, and they're really open in that. And so that was kind of my first experience of a shift from feeling very much like an outsider, very kind of suppressed, to being in a space which was a lot more inclusive and open and things like that. Despite that, I've spent a lot of my life feeling like I didn't really know where I fit in, where was home for me. I traveled around a lot in different ways, and always felt like I was seeking this feeling of belonging. And it's only really a few years ago that I actually finally came to a point of realizing that it's like, well, I haven't really stayed put long enough anywhere to feel like I belong. And actually that's what I really need to do, spend some time putting down some roots and focusing and really trying to create the community that I've been seeking for so long. Within that, for most of my 30s, I really struggled with depression. I had a couple of really big bouts of that, partly come off the back of some quite traumatic breakups. Particularly I had a big breakdown coming out of the end of COVID. During COVID, I had gone from a point where the point just before lockdown came in, I had got this work contract that I thought was going to really set me up. It was going to help me get on the property market, going out with a girl who was pretty much the girl of my dreams. I was madly in love with her. And then when the lockdown happened, the contract for this job got pulled immediately. Because I'd been freelancing, I wasn't really I couldn't really get any proper furlough pay, and because I worked in advertising and particularly events, there weren't any events for a year, so there was not really any work for me. And over that period of time, my mental health plummeted, my self-esteem plummeted. I become very anxious, and ended up breaking up with this girl towards the end of that period, and it completely spun me out for a long time. You know, I would say it was probably 18 months before I even started to feel like I had some sense of like stability again. And there was a lot within that where I was really questioning how I'd shown up. You know, I felt like I had done a lot of the things that you're meant to do. In that time, you know, I was doing my best to show up for my girlfriend and be supportive and be there for her. But at the same time, I was really struggling. I was really anxious about telling her that I was struggling. And so there was this point where I look back and I was like, you know, I did what I was meant to do and I didn't get the outcome that I thought I was going to get.
Yeah.
And that was a big learning curve for me of looking at all the ways that I was what I realized was I was attaching my self-worth to external metrics, really, to the fancy job title, to making good money, to having this great relationship and all those kind of things. And I realized actually there's a flip of that. There's very often you can have internal metrics of worth that you can align with those external metrics, but that can't be shaken when you lose your job or when you lose something. And so that was a real kind of first point for me of recognizing that actually things are probably can be very different from the way that I'd seen the world until that point. And that really started me on this journey into men's work. Started off, I worked with my own coach to start with while I was going through a lot of that. And he was amazing in helping me to kind of figure some of these things out. And then I progressed to working and coaching myself. And then from that, I then moved into training as a psychotherapist. And alongside that, getting into men's groups and running some men's groups as well.
I love that. Doing some great work. Did it just show you, like, you see people from the outside, and I've known you a long time, and you've shared some of these difficult times with me, but he's always in these exciting places and traveling around and teaching and searching and seeking out these exciting times. But then that internal world, if we don't align that, and society celebrates that, right? Get the partner, get the job, get the money, get the house. It's almost like encouraged from a young age that this is your path for life and the expectation of others or of society on us, but it doesn't always make us happy or work out the way in our heads that we've planned.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've definitely been there before myself as well, when your happiness is pinned on things that are outside of your control, not internal. And when those things start to fail, it doesn't really have the best results.
Absolutely, man.
And it's heartbreaking to hear about the bullying. Again, you've shared bits of that with me, and you kind of forget, and that's part of my journey. And that feeling like the rave scene, that was the first kind of point where you felt a level of acceptance and you're able to show up as your own true self. And I suppose that's the importance sometimes in community, because that was a community, right? That rave scene. Sure. I know you're looking a lot into community and the importance of that for men and men's mental health. Tell us a little bit about that, the group you've created, Brotherhood.
Yeah, so the Brotherhood, we have 5 mental health support groups. They're kind of peer-to-peer support groups, and they're all in Northamptonshire, in Kettering and the sort of surrounding towns. And the focus on them first and foremost is mental health support. So very often people come to us who are in sometimes some form of crisis. A real common thing we have is a lot of guys who are feeling very lonely and isolated, feeling like they don't have much meaning in their life and things like that. And so immediately, the starting point is sort of stabilizing that kind of thing. What we've realized recently, though, it's been really interesting, is a lot of people, when they first come, they have felt lonely, they haven't had much connection. And when they come into that space, everyone is terrified the first time because they don't know what they're going to walk into. And so they come into this space, they don't know if they want to open up, they feel ashamed of expressing what they're struggling with, all these kind of things. But once you hear a couple of other guys that are going through things, one of the immediate things is, okay, I'm not the only one who's struggling right now. And that immediately drops their shoulders a little bit and helps them feel a little bit calmer. And then when they say the thing that they're kind of quite terrified of saying, and everyone's like, yeah, man, we understand, we kind of recognize it. It's like, been holding that for so long, not wanting anyone to hear that. And now I don't have to carry it now. It's just, again, everything calms down a little bit more. And so very quickly you can be in this space where you probably feel more connected than even loads of your friends, because so many friends don't like open up and they don't want to be vulnerable.
You're not having those conversations, it's a different kind of conversation.
Yeah. So you can feel really connected and deeply connected with people quite quickly. And so there's definitely like this sudden upswell where people are like all about it and they really want to be involved and they want to do all these kind of things. We have noticed that there is almost like a churn point where sometimes people suddenly have a bit more social confidence and a bit more connection and a bit more kind of confidence in themselves. And then there can be a point where new people who are coming in who are bringing some quite heavy things, it can almost feel like the older guys that have been there longer kind of pulling them back down a little bit.
Right.
And so that's been an interesting thing recently. And what we've realized is as much as guys, we need to talk about that. And a lot of people say guys need to open up more. Totally. But we also, guys, really do need something to focus on of like, how am I moving forward? What's the thing that's helping me progress? And so the group initially was the kind of support thing, but actually we're now trying to make sure that we have both in place. So there's also activities, there's also projects. Next week there's a big like spring clean event that's happening in Kettering next week. And as the Brotherhood, we have a team of lads that we're going to go out and we're going to be painting some walls and getting involved with cleaning up the community and stuff like that.
Great.
So
different activities to get involved in, not just turn up if you're struggling, but actually there's this longevity to kind of recovery, healing, and staying connected. Like you said, we've got that deep connection, and you've helped me out when I was in that space. I want to stay connected to you. I want to stay in touch with you, and
it's for sure, man. It's like meaning, it's giving back, and it's being in community. We look after each other. So.
Yeah. And, Alcoholics Anonymous knew that 35 years ago. I'm not saying it's the same at all, but who better to help someone struggling, so with alcoholism, than someone who knows that struggle? And I've been carrying this shame, and I've not shared it with my mates or family because you've got that mask on and the guard up, maybe holding it a bit back, but then I can just be my true self and share it with you because you're that stranger that I know. I'm able to have these brave conversations with someone that's not in my other circle. And then that actually builds a bond. Probably greater than a lot of friendships.
Yeah, man.
You mentioned that loneliness and isolation was a common thing that brought men to the group. Why do you think that is so prevalent at the moment?
I mean, we are on the end of something that's been running for like generations on that, right? I think a lot of the men's struggles probably are fallout from the Second World War. I think a lot of men, like grandfathers for probably our generation, went off to war maybe. If they came back, probably saw such horrific things that like they didn't have anyone that they could open up to about it. There wasn't support in place, and so they bottled it all up. Their kids weren't able to connect with their fathers. They learned through that thing that it's like, well, you don't open up, and so that's been going on for generations anyway, alongside social media, cost of living crisis, like the shift in culture away from bars and things, all this kind of stuff, which has led people to just not be as sociable, not be as connected before. And so much fear in the world as well. We spoke briefly before the start of this around when people are afraid, there's almost like a natural impulse to like, back off a little bit, protect themselves, stay at home, not trust people around them. And there's a bit of a vicious downward spiral in that, which is if I don't know all my neighbours, or my neighbours keep changing quickly and I don't bother to kind of get to know them and I don't really want to speak to them, I kind of withdraw a little bit more and I trust people a bit less. And then, it continues. And one of the things I say is like, if you think about like being on a street where you don't know any of your neighbours and you don't really have many social connections or friends around you, and you hear a knock on the door at 2 a.m, like your mind is immediately like, that's a threat, right? Like, who the fuck's that?
Danger.
Not answering that.
I'm not answering that. You look on the Ring doorbell and you're like, what do they look?
Yeah.
Get away.
But if you live on a street where you know all your neighbours and you like hang out together and you like lend each other, tools or whatever it might be, and like, have parties in the summer and you help each other, then you have a knock on the door at 2 a.m. The likelihood of you seeing it as someone who needs help is like a lot more. And obviously that may or may not be the case, but like your mindset is different because of that.
Yeah.
The way you see the world is different because of that,
And that's why community is so important, right?
Absolutely. That immediately brings, changes your mindset, the way you see the world, you see opportunities differently. It gives you more access to opportunities because, the closer you are with people, the more you know how to help them, what the community need. You can put your effort into what's going to sustain and help the community. And you actually will just see things differently. Whereas if you see everything as a threat and you go in that downward spiral, it becomes worse and worse, you're limiting yourself.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in, human connection, helping each other out, lifting each other up, sharing experiences. And why wouldn't one do that? We're not supposed to go it alone or in isolation. We've all got different skills. There's probably, if you've got that community, use the street, for example, and you need something, there's probably someone on that street that knows how to do that, can lend you something. Yeah. Or even just lend you their experience. I've gone through a difficult divorce. What's it like for you? Just sharing that wealth of experience. And typically for men's mental health, we lock that in because of the shame, the stigma, the judgment that for too long has surrounded it. And it's interesting what you said about the Second World War as well. So you're a believer in that, I don't know if you label it generational trauma, things passed down. So I've done a lot of reading and work into that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's undoubtedly the case. And, there's many ways, there's many studies that have been done it. There's stuff that is even changed in genes as a result of trauma, right? But even on the level of, if your dad didn't open up, you learn by mimic that you don't open up. You learn that boys don't cry. You learn whatever it might be. If nothing else, that's going to be the case, and there's estimates that it takes like 7 generations for something traumatic to be worked out of the system.
Mad.
We've got some work to do.
Yeah. We're like halfway there.
No, but we're getting somewhere. Let's keep going. What you said about, because I saw Scott Galloway, you've heard of him, he's done some work in men's mental health, and he shared a perspective the other day about, drinking culture, bars, pubs, that's had a detrimental effect on men's mental health because we've seen that lessen. Less people drink today. Pubs are shutting down. He said the balance of the physical health impact potentially of drinking compared to the mental health impact, one far outweighs the other. And he kind of shared some views on we need to get back to not necessarily drinking alcohol, but finding that space where men can go, chat, meet as a community.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, there's an event that happened in Kettering about 6 months ago. It was called the Common Table, and this community group set it up. And basically, it was free event. Anyone in the community can come. The deal is it's like a potluck. So you bring a dish, you bring some food, everyone brings a dish, and all that happens is you put your food on the side, help yourself to anything you want, take a table and have a chat.
Brilliant.
Absolutely love it. And I had a good chat with them at the end, and I said, if this kind of stuff was regular, you wouldn't need the mental health stuff as much, because you're building a community, breaking bread together. You sat down, you're chatting about the town and everything that's going on, and you're kind of reinforcing that and making it an easy and accessible way to connect. And we do need spaces for that, and we do need to make it accessible and easy. And very often for men, they need something else going on so that it's not just the uncomfortable, difficult conversation.
Yeah.
They need a pub quiz, or they need like something to work on and build, or something like that.
You get things like I think it's a charity men's sheds, where it's men who meet and go and work on stuff in a shed and build something. You'd be great at that.
Yeah, I love that.
Stuff you're building in a shed.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. It's almost like we need to go and be doing something, even though there's something should also be talking and connection. You give me a project, a plan, something to do. That conversation, I think, naturally then emerges rather than it's tell me about your feelings. That whoa, hang on, that can feel a little bit alien to men still. Do you see in your world of psychotherapy that men are still less likely and more reluctant to seek out a professional for what we label as therapy, or are the numbers shifting on that now?
They're definitely shifting. There is a definite shift. There's reluctance to sometimes what it takes to really shift things. The therapeutic approach that I work in is very much focused on recognizing what is say emotionally hasn't been expressed. A lot of it will be kind of somatically being in the body, recognizing where there's tension, where there's when you feel ashamed, you can kind of feel it in your gut or in your chest or whatever it might be, and kind of spending time to actually make peace and feel safe enough to go there and express that. Men are obviously a lot less likely to go there easily, and there's a lot of still shame around expressing that. And it's really tricky because take the belief of boys don't cry, to actually then go in and tell someone that they need to express their emotion, they need to cry. From within that belief, they're going to do everything possible to get away from that. The one thing that they need to do is feel safe enough to actually go beyond that belief. And then they expand as a person, because it's like a limiting belief that it's cutting off part of who you are. And it's a human way of processing emotion, crying. Another good book, George Bell, called Be a Man About It. And the more we can smash that old-fashioned view that we're supposed to suppress emotion, not cry, not share a struggle, it just needs to be destroyed. I'm not saying go around crying all the time in a way that you're comfortable with people you're comfortable with, but it is sometimes the tool that's needed is to let it out of the body and physically cry. I mean, I often say, right, like people think that crying and weakness are the same, but I would say, if you say weakness and strength and crying, right? If you are like the UFC champion and like you're this close to winning your like the next fight, and then like you get knocked out, and then at the end of it you're crying, right? No one's going to tell you you're weak.
Absolutely.
No one
Yeah.
questions
No one's
that,
going to tell
right?
you.
Two-face, anyway.
Because strength, you're strong. There's undoubtedly you're strong, right? If you're judging yourself as being weak because of crying, it's because at some level you think that there's weakness in you. Okay, they're separate, but if you're attaching them together, it's the self-judgment that's the tricky thing there, right? You can do anything you can to be as strong as whatever. For me, the strongest men are the ones who don't deny any aspect of their expression. We take all of it. And, you know, absolutely, there are situations where you need to be the strong man and hold it together to help your family or help the people around you get through a thing. There's certain times when it's not okay to like cry your eyes out when you have to like rescue someone from a burning building or like whatever it might be. But you also need to process it afterwards as soon as you can.
Yeah.
Go and let yourself fully feel that pain.
Yeah. I love the way you described that. The passion that came out in your voice there.
Yeah.
I'm in. I'm following you. Yeah, completely. Like we need the full range of emotions, not seek out excitement, joy, peace, serenity, and try and avoid and dodge that. You know, might be times I've got to show up, but I need to feel that fully. I need to process that.
What actually happens to a man psychologically if he doesn't let out these emotions and these feelings?
I mean, they're going to be in there until they get expressed, right? And very often, like you can feel it in the tightness in your body, and normally there's a belief that goes with that, right? And boys don't cry as an example, right? You know, like if you go too close to a cliff edge and your entire body's like that, right? If you have a belief structure of something that you're not allowed to do, it kind of feels like that when you get close to breaking that. So if you're like, boys don't cry, and someone's provoking you and you're kind of getting near to tears, you can feel like, oh shit, like something's going to happen now. And maybe to start with, you get frustrated. And so someone's kind of getting a bit too close to the nerve for you. And now you're like getting a bit pissed off with them. Then you go into anger and you'll be like, okay, if you just don't stop, I'm going to attack you, right? Then you get into the fear of like, actually, I might cry in a minute. So now I'm trying to escape. I'm trying to just get out of the situation.
Yeah.
Then if I cry, I'm like in despair now, and probably shame, because boys don't cry. And so when it's all suppressed, it will start coming out in other ways, because I'll attack people. I'll feel justified in my anger and my attack of you, because if boys don't cry and you're provoking me, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And that's why we get in these situations where people take it out on the people around them or whatever, because they've learned that it's not okay. The belief justifies those actions, and from within that belief, it kind of makes sense. It's not a helpful belief, and we need to help people recognize that, and it's creating the safety to be able to move beyond it. But if it's not expressed, then it's there, and you can feel the tension in your body. You can feel like everything hold on when you're trying to, you know, it's not actually uncomfortable to feel emotion. It's uncomfortable to try not to feel emotion.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, totally. And what you said there really kind of resonate with me, because, you know, bullied at school, we've got that in common. I was really kind of creative, and I was like one of the shortest and thinnest at school. And it was almost like there was a point where I started to grow, and I found the gym, and there was this switch of, I'm going to bury that version of myself. I even had a little kind of funeral for the old version of myself. I was like, no one's ever going to bully me again. But the output of that was, it came out in fighting, steroids, drug abuse. You know, I don't consider that was ever nasty. I've always had a kind heart, or tried to. But if you wronged me in my head, because it triggered that response of that helpless, shamed young lad, I'm going to go 10 above where you're at and express that in a way. And I wasn't angry at that personal situation. I was angry at that little boy who felt shamed. I'm never going to be that person. It took years to unravel some of that. And that really, like, I can connect with that, what you've described.
And like the thing that in there is really important is, you said, you know, it's like if you're kind of, if someone's bringing something to you, right? Like we had a guy in the men's group a couple of weeks ago who came and said, like, he got in a lot of trouble for fighting and stuff. And generally it was like he was really anxious and really insecure, and like, you know, if he went into a bar or something, he'd kind of like make sure there was no one behind him all the time in this. If he felt a little bit provocation, he'd go like full Mike Tyson and just like just go berserk on people. And it was just because he was so anxious, and it was, you know, this is a really useful bit of information that I share, which is, you heard of like projection, which is if I feel a certain thing, unconsciously, I'm going to try and get you to feel it. And so if I feel intimidated, I'm going to try and intimidate you, because then I don't have to hold the discomfort. If I can get you more intimidated than I am, then I'm kind of free of it. If you're in a supermarket and your kid's throwing a tantrum and you feel powerless, it's because they feel powerless, you know? And you can kind of reverse engineer a lot of the dynamics to understand.
Yeah, and it's almost like I was thinking about when I was angry, I wasn't trying to prove to you I'm strong. I was trying to prove to that little boy within me, I'm strong and not that person anymore. You can really reverse engineer a lot of this stuff, can't you? And unravel it. And a lot of men out there don't really know that this is a thing, right? Unless we start with talking and maybe psychotherapy, learn about shadow work and generational trauma. All of this stuff can sound complicated, but my view is, why would I want to explore some of this to make my life better, be happier, healthier, well, and be that person for those around me? You shared you were going through a period of depression, and again, you're really open about your journey, and I love that. I think we need people to be open. This is real. This is raw. It's honest. When you went through the depression, that's a journey of recovery. But what were the things that helped you on that journey? Because this is about sharing tools that might help others.
Yeah. I suppose first I would say my thoughts on depression now are, if I believe the world is meant to work a certain way, I have like a belief structure, and we all, like, our experience of the world is built on these, like, you know, it's quite mad when you start kind of like breaking this down, because, you know, even like the language we speak is kind of a structure. It has like rules of what is and isn't allowed and all this kind of stuff, right? But anyway, if I see the world as a certain way, take Boys Don't Cry, right? And then within that, there's the rules of what's good and what's bad. If I find myself in a period of life where all the structures that I have of how things are meant to be are not functioning, and I can't find a way through, there's a point of like disillusionment and despair, which is like, I can't move in this place and I'm stuck within it. And very often the place of getting past that is part of it needs to break. You know, you have to hit rock bottom. Like the rock bottom really is, I've tried everything I could to live up to this image of how things are meant to be, and I suddenly realized that I just can't do it. When I give up, the illusion shatters, and now I'm able to like start from a place of like, I'm not trying to show I'm a certain way. I'm not trying to like, you know, present myself in a certain way. I actually meet the reality of where I am right now, and it's humbling. Of course, it's like the ultimate like in humbling. But now I can see like a fresh reality, and now I can start putting in things in place and choosing a little bit more consciously how I want to be and how I want to move and that kind of thing. But from within those frames, we're going to try everything to maintain the frame, because that's the way that we think things are meant to be. And so for me, before all of that, it was like, well, the important things are the job that I have and the money that I'm making and the relationship that I have and all that. And so that was my frame. And when that wasn't there, I spent 18 months being like, well, why? And how do I justify how can I justify what's happened within that frame and hold the integrity of that perspective? And I couldn't. And then there was a break where it was like, well, I give up because I can't.
And that's you kind of rock bottom and then rebuild, right?
Yeah. What were some of the dominant emotions you remember having when you were in depression? So mine would definitely be numb, flat, and there's a fancy word for that, and hedonia.
Okay.
I didn't feel happy, sad. I was just like, I was watching my life through on a screen. You know, there's a period of that where I thought, I'm never going to feel happy again. And I think that's when some of the substance misuse can come in, because it's better to feel something than nothing. But then what goes up must come down. But I was like very numb, very flat.
I was the same for a lot of it. And then I had periods where it was like deep despair and like desperation and feeling like, you know, I needed to get my life back on track and I needed to do stuff. And I sometimes became quite frantic, where I suddenly went off and did like every single fucking workshop possible, you know, or like signing up to like, you know, real deep like shadow work stuff, and then like sex, like, you know, relational kind of like workshops, and had a coach going on, and like psychedelics, and like everything at the same time, which is not helpful. But it's that desperation of like, I need to find like how to fix this. You know, and again, that for me is very often it's a necessary thing where we're trying to find all these things that help make sense within that perspective we have. But actually, for me, the most important thing is actually letting go of the perspective and being a bit more free. And I would say you can think of confidence like that as well. Way most people think of confidence, I would call situational confidence. And then I would say there's also like authentic confidence. And situational confidence is within a certain belief frame, or everything's a frame. So say like boxing. If you want to be confident in boxing, you have to train really hard. You have to, fight a lot. To get really like practice. You need to get to a level of competence that gives you the confidence that you are capable. Right. Real confidence for me is like being fine no matter what happens. So if you, in that situation, if you don't care about getting knocked out, right? I think about this. Right. If you're, if you're like UFC champion, and some little kid like comes up to you on the street and starts to pick a fight, right? Are you going to get in a fight?
Not with a little kid.
You're probably going to shut it down, right?
I mean, if he kicks me in the shin, maybe.
but if this kid like is afraid, and they think that they need to like puff themselves up and do whatever, they might come in windmilling, and they might do whatever because they are trying to live up to something, right? So for the fighter though, you have the confidence that you know you can handle whatever happens, and so you can control the situation without even having to get in a fight, right? But if you don't have to get into a fight, do you need to know how to fight to be able to control that situation?
That's a good analogy.
And I would say, like, if you don't care about being knocked out, you could probably still control the situation because your nervous system will be regulated enough to be like, okay, calm down, we're not going to do that. Okay. And now that doesn't mean that if a fight happens, then you're in trouble because you don't know how to fight. It's fine. It's not what I'm saying, because, we need situational confidence in a context. But the real confidence is I can come on stage and I can speak, but I'm also vulnerable enough to be like, oh, I'm really nervous today. And just be real and human and talk to the audience and not have everything perfect, and don't mind if I slip up or stumble my words or anything.
Yeah. Being vulnerable, that's a big thing. That's a relatively new concept. Be vulnerable, show your true self. If you're nervous, anxious, worried, you can be open about that. And I think maybe some of that, those past ways of thinking passed down was you're supposed to get this right and add a level of pressure. I mean, even when I remember you're learning to drive, right? You got to reverse park and do all this stuff that we have to do less now. And then, the instructor's there, and you can feel that energy. You're like, you need to get this right. Almost that angry energy, like, I don't want to mess this up. And that can make it worse. But also it can set the standard where I remember that. So anything less than that, well, I know I could handle that and I got through it. It's one of those kind of situations.
Yeah. And again, back to what I would say is like the most masculine way of being, which is like holding the biggest breadth. It's capacity, really, and one of the things that I would say is how I would describe what it means to move from a boy to a man is to go through something that blows your capacity way beyond what you had before, to a point where you recognize that the people that you used to hang around with, say, can't relate to what you can see now.
Right.
And this happens all the time in different situations, but like, traditionally in other cultures, in tribal cultures and stuff, there'd be some form of rite of passage where a young boy would be like...
It's funny you should say, me and you have been watching Ed Stafford's Rite of Passage, haven't we? About all the different cultures.
Yeah.
Initiation into manhood. I absolutely love it.
I love it as well. It's giving you some funny ideas. You keep saying to me, do you want to go and do that? He had like the bullet ant on his hands for 4 minutes, and then apparently the pain lasts 24 hours. First message, I really want to do that.
Let's go to Brazil.
I don't want to as well. So maybe some of that stuff is...
We don't have that like these days, do we? We don't really have like a rite of passage that you go from a boy to become a man.
100%. And it's so missed, and there's knock-on effects of that as well. If you think about a tribe in South America, they might have something like 10 years old boy gets like maybe a bit older, gets ceremonially like torn away from his mum, gets sent away into the jungle by himself on maybe like a vision quest or like some kind of physical ordeal. And when he returns, he's gone through such like kind of traumatic experience, really.
Yeah.
But he realizes that like he is a man now because the other kids running around, they don't have a clue. And now he knows what he can hold. He knows that he's gone through something that means that like he's not going to get upset about like the stupid trivial things that he was concerned about before and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he comes back and he takes up his role in society for service of society. He probably has a job at that point. And so the interesting thing about us not having these kind of rites of passage is that in many ways our culture is really juvenile still. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because all evolutionary technological growth, all that kind of stuff happens in the juvenile stage, because it's at that point it's like you're exploring the world, you're finding out what you're good at, you're kind of figuring out it's about yourself. It's quite a self-centered way of being in the world. And so you go out and you try things and you try and make money for you and you try and do whatever. But like when you don't have the turnaround, which is coming back to serving the community, then it's a runaway mind train, and you get the kind of distorted things that we're seeing in the world with the billionaires and whatever else, people who are just like still in that juvenile mindset of I'm the priority here. And adulthood for me is you go through something so traumatic that you realize that you have a capacity to hold everyone around you so well that you can then be there to support them. And that turnaround is I do it for them now. I'm in service. And we don't really have that, and we're lacking it, and we're seeing the fallout of it.
Having a purpose. Well, I'm in service now of the community, my family, my friends. That there's a purpose there, and I think that could be really important for men, having a purpose. 100%. Why am I here? Why am I on this earth? You know, it's got to be more than just these hats we wear in the mass. It's got to be a greater feeling of purpose.
Purpose comes in relation to people. You need an emotional connection. And that's the problem. Like so many people are chasing more and more material goods and whatever, thinking that's going to fulfill them, but it's not. And if you don't have a close-knit community, you can't feel that. And that's why the closer you can build that, suddenly you're like, well, what do the people around me need? How could I improve their lives? If you really care about these people, the bigger the circle that you can have that you care about genuinely, the more purpose and drive you'll have, because you can see the direct influence that your actions have on the lives of the people you care about. That's where purpose is.
They say as well, don't they? If you're struggling with something, or if you then what you should probably do is go out and help someone else.
You know, anyone who's gone through something really traumatic, say like PTSD, gone off the war kind of thing, sometimes you've seen something that's so horrendous that like it doesn't make any sense. You can't reconcile it. Maybe you won't be able to fully heal that. But one of the things that often happens is people turn to acts of service to help people who have gone through something similar, because it gives some meaning to their experience. Without helping someone else, you're just lost in like the horrors and the terror and the pain and the pointlessness of some of it. But if you can just help someone else just to navigate so they don't suffer as much, you've got meaning. It's in relationship.
That peer-to-peer support, I'm a big believer in that. You know, some of the great charities and organisations out there, the links are in the description. Someone who's gone through that thing and they're willing to help others going through that thing, I think there's a big value in our own lived experience. Can you please sign off and give us your top tips for men's mental health, and then let everyone know how they can connect with you? You know, because you're doing some great things. We'll put the descriptions in the chat.
Okay. So I mean, as I said, we really identified within the groups that there is like a two-pronged thing needed. One thing is being able to open up about the things that you've been suppressing. And as I say, the more that you are able to allow everything in your experience, everything in your expression, you expand. You have a bigger capacity to meet other people. You can recognize that in other people as well. So finding some form of community where you can actually sit down and be really open and honest and authentic just helps you put down all those walls that stop you from being able to connect in that way and to meet people. And at the same time, it's really important to have some form of purpose, some focus, something where you can see some forward momentum. And that's like, I talk about anchors a lot, where it's like the more anchors you can have that give you things to hold on to when you're going through the storms. One of the best ones is having the community. One of them is like having some form of purpose. What it might be, if you're really not in a good place, just what's the basic routine that you can have just to give you something consistent to hold on to. You know, maybe you go for a walk first thing in the morning. If maybe you make your bed, if that's like how low like you have to start.
I love that. Absolutely love that.
I love that. The basics aren't so basic. They're fundamental parts of being human. They're just or basic. Make your bed, go for a walk, structure, routine, purpose, belonging, being honest, talking. You know, these are, a lot of these things are free, right? They're the way we were supposed to always live before the modern world happened. Not demonizing it, but just recognizing the things we can share, the things we can do to help each other out, lift each other up.
Beautiful.
And where can people reach you if they want to contact you? And
So my Instagram is James Garside. My therapy work is Embrace Everything. So you can find me at embrace-everything.com. And then the men's work is Brotherhood Men's Groups. So we have Brotherhood Men's Groups on Instagram, Facebook, and also brotherhoodmensgroups.com as well. We're doing, we have like the 5 main groups in Northamptonshire. We're starting to look at some workshops that will be a bit more open, specifically around maybe like an 8-week session on masculinity, having a bit more structure and about like finding your own strengths and purpose, like relational, emotional kind of stuff. And we're also looking to take some of that into schools now and work on some of that with younger adolescent boys and stuff to give them a bit of structure and things. So
love that. So we can fast track those 7 generations we've got to work through.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, and that's going to stack up to another 3 generations, right?
It's really needed there. So
amazing. You know what, James? Thank you so much for coming on, sharing your wealth of experience. It's been a great chat. You know, qualified psychotherapist, please connect with James, reach out, and like and subscribe as always, because this is a free resource, real tools and real talk for men's mental health.
Thank you.
cheers, dude. Thanks so much. Awesome, brother.
Thank you, brother.